Hey everyone, a quick announcement before we begin. This time around, I tried something a little different. Rather than my usual recording method of either in person or a closed session between my guest and I actually recorded over Discord while my guest, Kaz PhD, streamed the convo to his Twitch. There were a few technical hiccups, like despite my best efforts, I still borked my OBS settings and didn't properly record my own audio, but the live session itself was fantastic. So if you're listening to this in the audio-only podcast form, what you're hearing is the extracted audio from the live stream. Keep in mind that there may be a few occasions where we reference something that is happening in chat or on screen that you're not going to be able to see because, well, I hope I don't have to explain that to you. And if you're watching this in video form, what you're watching is the background gameplay that was streamed during the recording. Hopefully, next time I'll actually get my OBS set up properly, and you'll actually get to see my facial expressions and such. Until then, please enjoy the latest podcast episode.
Crosstalk, the unintentional transfer of signals between communication channels, a casual conversation.
Hello world, this is Video Game Crosstalk, the podcast of gamers talking tech, science, and whatever else comes to mind. I'm your host, Anthony Rossi, and with me this episode 048, I am joined with Kaz PhD. Kaz, thank you so much for accepting this invite and letting me in on your stream.
Hey, of course. Thank you for having me. It is one of those requests that kind of came out of nowhere, but it all came together well, I think.
Oh yeah. I mentioned, well, I know you knew that I had a podcast, but I can't remember explicitly if I was like, you should come on sometime. And if I did, it was probably like 6 months ago or some craziness like that.
Yeah, when we first kind of met, we had a lore panel or two on my side, and then everybody got really busy with Beyond Light, and and then the world happened, and you know, now we're
the
here.
world continues to happen. You know, with all due respect, good sir, the world continues to happen. I actually ran into one of my previous guests a few weeks ago, and we were discussing about how we had talked about it. It was just the beginning of the pandemic, and we were like, well, silly us, we all thought it was going to be over in just a handful of months. And here we are, full year plus later, still going strong, but at least it's on the downswing for real this time.
Yeah.
I think. I
hope.
Yeah,
I mean, even there's a couple, you know, worldwide, there's a couple of places that are really dealing with it, but I mean, your country is the testament of how you can go from one extreme to the other and by working together, right? Like, I'm kind of jealous. I look around and I see just like everybody I follow on social media, most of them are from the US. Like, I got my second shot today, and it's like, oh, I don't even know when I can get my first one.
Really?
Yeah, Canada. So I'm a Canadian and I'm living in France. Both countries are a little slow with it. I'm not sure. Well, Canada is slow because, at least in Ontario, one of the major provinces, the government is not very coordinated, which is the nicest way of saying it, I think. And in France, I think it's just supply chain stuff. It's just we have a much older population, and it's going to take a while before, you know, they get through everything.
Okay. Yeah, here in the US, it's basically you are of one of two thoughts. The first thought I will openly mock, and that is the anti-vax type crowd, and I will openly mock them. And the other half of the crowd is, I cannot get in line soon enough to get this. It is one of the two extremes. There are a few handfuls in there. I did have a few friends and coworkers who were wary about like, I don't know if I want to be the first in line for this vaccine, which is understandable because this was developed very quickly. But reading into the methods that were used and knowing that these research methods have actually been in development and in use for I don't know how many years right now. And also working in the corporate world for as long as I have, I assure you, miracles can happen when suddenly the company has the motivation to say, everyone off your current projects, unlimited overtime, we need this done now.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've had that experience or what your workplace is like, but if we were to devote all resources to a singular goal, it is amazing how fast things can work. And I'm willing to bet that a lot of the compression of the schedule is overstaffing for resources and doing things in parallel.
Yeah. And that's what they said. I've seen some interviews and things like that, and yeah, having things done in parallel, kind of instead of approaching it like in a assembly line, you're approaching it, things are happening concurrently. So I mean,
I also go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just gonna say it makes sense. I mean, look at it's being offered for free around the world. Like, what does that if not through a strong cooperative effort?
Right, and I did also hear where one issue where the companies who were doing the development and research ran into a lot of waste and just stuff that just, well, it didn't work because they were doing so much work. In the project management world, it's called at risk. So it's like, we're going to move forward with this, even though all the data isn't collected, but we're going to act like everything was satisfactory. And if it isn't satisfactory, all this work is going to be for nothing. But when you do work at risk, again, the schedule compression is immense, and that's why it's done. Which goes back to my previous comment of like, everyone's got unlimited overtime. Do it. We need this done immediately.
Yeah, I guess normally if you'd be doing something and you would wait, let's say you have to, I don't know, even if you have to test something twice and you do the first test and it's fine, normally you have to wait for the second one. If they already start packing the boxes and stuff and then the second one comes in and it's fine, well, you get that acceptance.
Awesome, we just saved months.
Yeah, exactly. So no, I understand the concern that people might have, but like you said, it's not exactly new. I mean, I don't remember how old I was when the SARS flu, was kind of the thing. But
I remember that.
Yeah, but I
remember that for one very specific reason. I'm going to tell you. Excuse me. I'm going to let you tell your story, and then I'm going to tell mine of why I remember the SARS flu so well.
So for me, all I really remember about it was I had an aunt who was in the hospital at the time, and everything turned out fine. But she was there, and my cousins were there, and they kind of talked about how they had to they had to wash their hands so many times that their hands were actually starting to kind of crack from the from doing that. So that's really all I remember about it. But it wasn't that long ago, and so when people are worried about it being new, this is built off of the same thing, right? It's the same. It's a similar family. Like, coronavirus seems new and obviously scary just because of the impact it's had, but I mean, it's also a cousin to the common cold, right?
Right.
Like, I mean,
cousin of.
Yeah.
Cousin of. It is not.
No, cousin of. I'm just saying, like, I'm not medically trained, but yeah, from what I've seen, it's from the same family of it, so it's not like our doctors and scientists had zero idea about this thing. It was just a different strain, with different pathology, different different behaviors, but you could start somewhere.
Right. So my fun, not so fun memory of SARS was I remember it distinctly because I definitely got it. I definitely got infected, and it was bad. It was horrible. But what makes me remember it was I was still going out to a lot of concerts, and I'm quite the metalhead at the time. So I was going out to a lot of concerts, and I mean, band was coming to town. I'm gonna go see this band, and I remember it was at one of the local venues, and I went to see Five Finger Death Punch. And the entire time I think to myself, this is a bad idea with this going around because it was a packed house. And this isn't one of like your outdoor major event venues. This is between their first and second albums. So like they were still fairly small before they became like these mega stars that they are now. And there were several hundred people. Everyone's I don't for those who have been in hardcore and metal shows, you got a bunch of sweaty dude bros who are shirtless and throwing down in the pits, as I was myself. And I'm thinking, this is a bad idea. And sure enough, by the time Monday rolled around, I was bedridden for a day or two.
Oh, remember concerts?
Oh, yeah, I know. Right? I still have a lot of friends who perform, who do different bands, a few different hip hop MCs. They're still doing their thing, or at least being active in the community. Oh, concerts were so much fun. They're so much fun. But let's get into this a little bit. So you, Kaz, one of the things that we talk about on this show is the guest interview portion where it's like, who are you? What do you do? And it sounds kind of rough to say, what do you bring to the community? But in this case, you are, as your Twitter profile reads, you are a quote space engineer. So what is that?
Yeah. So the simplest explanation is it's exactly what it sounds like. I am an engineer who
Right.
focuses on the space industry. So my educational background was kind of aeronautical aviation engineering, but
Mm-hmm.
instead of focusing on planes or buildings, bridges, etc., I was focused on satellites, rockets, robotic probes, things like that.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was my background. Nowadays, I work as what's called a space market analyst, which essentially means I'm studying the space industry, uh, the technology that's being developed, the services and products that are being made, understanding who's buying, who's selling, to provide
Mm-hmm.
that kind of intelligence to anybody who wants it.
Really? So, okay. So how long have you been working in the space industry?
So let me think. It's actually been 5 years now. I mean, I did a lot of academic stuff, but like actually employed, I've been working for 5 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
Yeah, go ahead.
all right. I was gonna say. So what was your academic stuff?
So academically, I mean, I did an internship at the Johnson Space Center, NASA's space center for human spaceflight.
Mm-hmm.
And I've done a lot of like little academic projects. Like a lot of times, universities will, as either part of their education, or sometimes they'll have funding, or sometimes they'll have like a professor who actually wants to do stuff. They will work on.
Hey.
Well, that was
Okay.
I didn't know. I didn't mean to make a dig. I meant they wanted to do some like real hands-on stuff, not just like theoretical
Okay.
work or whatever.
Oh, nice, nice, nice.
They'll design satellites. So sometimes it's just an educational thing. It's like, hey, this is what a satellite does and how it works, and it would be like a school project. Other times it's more like, oh no, we have like grant money and we want to launch a satellite that has, I don't know, yeast on board to see what that does in orbit.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll often have people like me who we have a background in this, or we know the business a little bit, who can kind of consult and say, well, all right, this is kind of the different options you can go with, and here's who, if you want to buy off the shelf, here's what you can do, and oh, you have this particular need for your science experiment, okay, you're going to want this kind of equipment. So
So
yeah,
are you like in that capacity? Were you almost like a consultant for like, here's the job I want to do, here's what you're gonna need?
kind of, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
For that, again, for me, it was more academic. Like I wasn't. It was me kind of learning the ropes, both of the technology and the the industry. Think of me like a real intern
Okay.
in a company in that case, but mostly academic. Now what I do is I'm a full-on consultant for the business of space. So what'll happen often is a company comes to me and they say, look, we have this cool, let's say they're like, we have this cool camera, and we're thinking we can use it to record some really interesting data from the Earth. And they might come to me and say, would anybody in the industry be interested in buying this? What kind of satellite would be, most suitable for it? Who's buying? How much is it for, etc. Or they might come to me and say, we got this cool camera. We want to get this data and then sell that data to somebody else. Is there a market for that? And I can come to them with, in my experience and say, well, yeah, actually, like, the U.S. government ordered this much of that kind of data last year, and they're very open to buying it. Or
Okay. Nice.
yeah, and so it's consulting services. It's providing market and business and technology intelligence. Yeah.
Sounds like a blast. So what are some things that people have? I should back that up a little bit. Are you allowed to discuss some of the more fun and interesting things that people have requested to send into space?
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Like Chardonnay?
Yeah, I mean, you do get like these weird requests to send all kinds of stuff up there. Often it's like a marketing or advertisement stunt. You hear about
So
sometimes.
be it.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes space is still expensive, right? So a lot of times companies with, but it's still high profile. You put your name on a satellite, you put your name on a rocket, people are going to see it, right? If SpaceX wanted to start putting like company logos on the side of their rockets like NASCAR, people would pay them a lot of money to do that because people are watching those launches. But in terms of actually what's gone up there, it's relatively new because it's still quite expensive. But you get things like starting from the. Oh, go ahead.
I apologize to people. Not sure if you can hear my dog barking in the floor below me, but
So far so good. I can't hear it.
okay, fair enough. Hey, wait, I have doggos. If you follow me on my social media, you know I've got doggos. So.
But yeah, most of the time things that go up are most of the time they're scientific or they have some kind of specific purpose. But we've heard of a bunch of crazy stuff that never really went anywhere. Like pretty much every 2 years, some company in France or Germany or Italy will say, or Spain will say, hey, let's launch wine into space, or let's use fancy cameras to take pictures of wine from space. It often comes up as this like funny news item, but yeah, you do get a lot of like strange requests from people to put things up into space, but it's still an expensive business because it's essentially it's not like going out and buying a Honda Civic and they're available at every lot and they're whatever price they are. It's more like you're buying a custom Porsche every time.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, I have faith within my lifetime that sending things up into space will become, more and more routine. Like it'll happen, especially with the private companies getting into it.
Yeah.
But just because it's common doesn't mean that it's still anywhere like feasible for something that you can do on a routine basis.
Well, that's it. I mean, one of the areas I cover is space tourism. So in the last decade,
we're talking about that.
Yeah,
we are talking about it. So go for it.
In the last decade, there's been a lot of technology development toward trying to, launch people to orbit or what's called suborbit. So it's like basically 100 kilos. I think that's like 60 miles.
Okay.
60 miles up. Anything below that is suborbit. So companies like Virgin Galactic are the big ones, Blue Origin, etc. So there's a lot of interest in it, and the technology.
Hold on, so the guy that jumped from the weather balloon, the Red Bull guy that jumped,
Felix Baumgartner. Well, technically, I guess it depends on your definition. For me, I don't put it in the same category because while it was impressive, I believe it was, I want to say like 30 or 40 kilometers up, which is still crazy.
Okay.
Um,
Still
yeah,
respect. Still
yeah,
crazy. Yes.
yeah. But usually for this kind of business, like 100 kilometers is the orbit that you're looking at, and you're usually getting pretty close to that. The thing with suborbit is that if you you got to be careful where you draw the line, because there are companies, for example, that are trying to launch balloons that that only go to like 30 or 40 kilometers up. So where you count kind of it depends on what you're talking about. But for this business, yeah, it's anywhere from where he jumped up to about 100 kilometers up, and companies are looking to do that. And they've been trying for a while because people are interested. Um, a lot of times in business, you have to convince people to buy. It's not, if you think about like the iPhone, right? The iPhone is the exact opposite. You don't have to convince people to buy. You just have to put the product out there and it's available. But every other product, you have to convince people that it's something they want, something they need, and that they want yours more than they want anyone else's. With space tourism is the iPhone of the space industry because everybody wants it. And you tell them, well, that it doesn't exist yet. It's dangerous. It's not there. And they say, okay, fine, but I'll book a ticket now. When it's good to go, I want to do it. Everybody wants to do it. So the demand is quite high. And if you have high demand, then you can make money if you get it done. So companies are really working overtime to try and make this happen. But we're not there yet. Technology doesn't, it technically exists. Like SpaceX has successfully launched people to and from the space station, but those were government programs, expensive, rare. But it's happening more and more. Like SpaceX is planning to launch private citizens either later this year or early next.
That's actually earlier than I was expecting because while SpaceX has been doing some successful launches, they've had some failures.
Mm-hmm.
And another reason I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say that another reason why everything's so expensive with throwing things up into space is when you have a failure on this isn't a fender bender. There are no fender benders in space launches.
Yeah.
There are maybe fender obliterators, but there's not like, oh, we can buff that out. No, there's nothing to buff out if this goes wrong.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, space, one of the reasons it is so expensive is that it's over-designed. And it has to be, right? You can't send a mechanic up there to fix it. You can't, in most cases anyway. Hubble actually had some mechanics fixing it, funny enough. But yeah.
They have a space station. There is a space station up there.
Exactly.
Somewhere in the.
Yeah, but for
you're
most
not going to
time,
have someone working mid-flight.
Exactly. So it's over-engineered, over-designed because it needs to be, and it's got to be able to work mostly on its own. So we're getting there, and sometimes you have to kind of just trial by fire or try until fail until you don't, essentially, right? Like if you're able to maintain that kind of momentum to keep going with it, then yeah, that's one way of getting yourself to space.
That's the first time I've heard that expression, but it fits. Try until you
fail until you don't, right?
Fail until you don't. Yes. Yeah, that's pretty much the way that I'm guessing that's the way a lot of development goes. Hey, here's something we want to try. Here's the first prototype. Oh, look, it failed. Like everyone knew it was going to. But and speaking of SpaceX and a couple of its failures, Elon Musk, as crazy as he is, did make a good point where as long as you're able to recover a lot of the data of what went wrong, as long as you can have recoverable data and use that to make the appropriate corrections, that is a success. In its own way, as far as development is concerned.
Yeah, exactly.
Because if everything works every single time, it's like, all right, well, it works. We don't see anything going wrong. But it's when things go wrong, that's when you see the weaknesses. That's where you see your vulnerabilities. That's where you work out the kinks and iron things out to make sure that it doesn't happen again. And we all know what happens. I mean, we're gamers. So what happens when you release a game unto the wild?
Yeah,
There is
exactly.
no better bug finding than releasing it into the wild.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it it's all about knowing that these issues are going to happen. You plan for them, you prepare for them, but when they do happen, yeah, you need to be in the best position to learn from them. Capture that data,
Mhm.
report it, communicate it, and iterate on it. Right? Design through iteration as well, where you make small improvements and you check
Mhm.
how they balance each other.
Well, and it's important to make small well, I mean, depending on the process, depending on the resources you have, blah 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 blah. It makes sense to do small incremental changes
Yeah.
rather than multiple changes at the same time, because when you get into complex systems, you change one thing, change 6 things, change 12 things. Well, the whole system acted differently. Well, how did it act differently? Which change affected that? To what degree did each change affect the final outcome? So yeah, it did definitely go into small incremental changes, and then going back to, there are no fender benders in space launches. That's expensive, yes, but we need to make sure we've got control of this situation. We control of what's going on. So yeah,
Yeah.
I can only imagine how uh, long it will take. But apparently, SpaceX is going for later this year. Is what you said?
Yeah, there's a private company that wants to
Mm-hmm.
launch their own. They want to launch their own astronauts, and they're planning on doing that later this year. The idea is that uh, there's basically two. There's two. Well, okay. I guess there's three types of customers involved here. There's agencies like NASA who say, you know what, we don't want to launch our own stuff anymore. We want like private companies to do it because they have, I don't know, better prices or things are faster, etc. So that's what SpaceX has already done. They've launched
And,
NASA astronauts, right?
yeah, and methinks private companies are a bit more agile than government entities.
Usually, yeah.
Just throw it out there. Just throwing it out there.
Yeah, so you have that, and then you have like what most people think of, where it's like the really consumers, so the average everyday person, and then you have something in the
Mhm.
middle where it's like scientists, or big pharmaceutical companies, etc. They want to get involved. And they're not government agencies, but they're not the private citizen either. Um, so that's what's going up first. SpaceX is going to launch
Okay.
them to get them to try out their mission and make sure everything works, etc. And if all goes well, then yeah, they are planning. I think they are planning kind of a charity funded mission or something in 2022, maybe 2023. Basically,
Mhm.
they have a mix of like truly commercial customers, like the average everyday person, as well as a couple, like one or two actual astronauts who have retired from NASA but are getting involved with this mission.
Oh, they'd be foolish not to do a charity event for one of these launches, because I mean, all eyes are on them every time that they do something. It's a big profile event every single time, and as you said, it's like you don't need to do publicity
Yeah,
for this type of thing. So the publicity is already built in, and you're going to have the eyes of many people, let alone, let's be honest, many people with deep pockets that want to get involved and have their name associated with the event.
yeah. Space is just one of those things that it's you can put it in the headline and it will be enough. Like
Yeah.
you try to generate interest around other subjects like gaming, like I don't know, certain other kinds of events, and you really have to work to kind of grab the media's attention. But you talk about space and people are immediately interested. It just has this kind of appeal that um, people can latch onto.
Hmm. All right. So we're going to move on to the next segment. We're going to talk about some gaming news, see what's going on. So right now, well, obviously, so in the video version, if I am able to do a video upload of this, you're going to see me looking down all the time because I got my camera and I'm looking down. I'm looking down at the chat on the Twitch, and you obviously are playing Destiny 2 right now, a game which both of us are lore nerds of. And for those who follow my YouTube channel, yeah, I've got several lore videos going, so we're both big fans of this. And we recently just had a new seasonal content drop, and all right, so I need to take a step back for a moment and kind of explain. This is the first podcast I've done in like 6 months or so. It's been a long time. And we have, just because life has gotten hectic, and we are now very deep. What is this, season 14?
Yeah, season
As
14.
far as Destiny is concerned. And they keep revamping how they do the seasons. Every few seasons or so, they kind of revamp what they're doing. Oh, Doggo arrived. Hey, puppy. Hold on, going to get a video shot. And sorry for those who are watching the stream, you're not going to be able to see this. Where'd she go? There she is. Yeah, I am actually in like one of our spare offices in my house because where I normally do some of my recording and such, the way that our wireless network is set up, I get horrible reception, even though I got a network extender. But then my computer wants to kind of jump between the extender connection and the standard connection, and I keep losing. I got to get a network mesh. Yes, puppy, I see you. Hello.
I was gonna say, you say you're in the office, but it's more like you're in the dog's bedroom, right? The way they're acting right now. Like...
Yeah, right. Well, all right. Now the other one has figured out where I am, so we got both of them up here now. Oh, the poppers. Oh, the poppers. So
yeah,
you were talking
about
of a new season. They made more changes. What are your thoughts on the changes that they've made for this season?
So, okay. So I think for the most part, it kind of depends on with Destiny. It always depends on what type of player you are and when was the last time you played. So, right.
What happens?
Yeah, and even just besides the lore, if you talk about like mechanics and stuff, what they've been doing the last like 9 months is they've been really iterating this system of they have a new way that they're doing seasons. They have like certain challenges and triumphs and achievements that you can go through, and I think right now we've kind of reached a really good version of that. Like 2 seasons ago, they introduced a few things and it was okay, kind of slow and confusing. Last season, there was a lot of stuff introduced all at once, and I know it confused a lot of people for a while, but they got the hang of it. And this season goes, okay, so you understood how those things work. Now we've kind of got I don't know if it's perfected per se, but I feel like this season, in terms of how it works, is much more understandable because we've had practice with the previous ones, and the developer themselves have had the chance to kind of iterate them. What works, what doesn't, what do people like, what do they don't, etc. So yeah, I guess mechanically it's been good. I could definitely talk about the story if we want to dive into there, but I wasn't sure where you wanted to start.
So it's a toss-up, right? I don't want to make this is not a Destiny podcast, but
well, yeah. So Destiny. So for those out there, if you've never played or haven't played for a while, right? Destiny is it's a story that always has amazing lore, but the story in the game has always been lacking, right? You have you have a game that sets itself up as you have a gun and magic powers, go fight bad guys, and that's really about as far as it goes until we get like a big expansion. But then the lore goes very deep and very wide. Almost every genre is represented. Every character you run into has a literal book about them. Alien races have, culture and history. So what the short version is, one thing I'm really happy about is that Destiny has been narrowing that gap between story and lore, so that the players who play the game and don't want to read everything, they can get into it a lot more. There's a higher accessibility to it, which is really nice to see.
Oh yeah, definitely, and that is something that, excuse me, was a big change between Destiny 1 and Destiny 2, where everything was in the grimoire. Everything, almost everything,
Yeah.
was kind of like off the game, outside the game. And now, and I'll keep saying this because it's such a better representation of how we have the lore tabs within the different items. Something that I'm finding interesting is that there are the ritual weapons now. So
Mhm.
rather than having a ritual weapon or a pinnacle weapon that you can get from the different activities, it's that one pinnacle weapon that you can obtain either through Crucible, Gambit, or Strikes, and then you can earn the respective ornaments or skins
Mhm.
for people who play other games.
Yeah.
When you get these new ritual weapons now, there is very, I guess, timely lore, because the lore that is discussed in the ritual weapons lore tab is stuff that's happening like right now in the game. It's not like a background story. It's like,
Yeah.
here's a little side story of what's going on right now. Like, I have kind of an outline written for Salvager's Salvo, the
Mhm.
grenade launcher from last season, because this is something that I love about Destiny, or proper storytelling, I should say. With proper storytelling, which Bungie's really getting into now, they'll throw in this one little seemingly throwaway line. There's just like a one sentence, a short sentence, either like at the end of a story, in the middle of a story, somewhere. This one seemingly insignificant line where where if you catch it, wow, the implications are massive. And the one that I'm talking about right now is for Salvage or Salvo. Towards the end, Ikora is kind of looking the gun over, or looking, not the gun, the
Yeah, it was a device, like a
the
tool of some
widget.
kind. Yeah.
Yeah, the widget, we'll call it, that blocks the Guardian's light. And there's that one line where she says that she hopes that the lightless never get a hold of this.
Hmm. Interesting.
There's that one line. And there's a lot of implications there, because in previous web lore entries that are on Bungie.net, there's some tension between the normals, the normies, the lightless, and the Guardians, about how if the Guardians really were such a saving grace for humanity, then they would have done something by now. Why are we still hiding behind the walls? Why are we still in this one singular city? Why haven't we moved out? They just go out and kill a bunch of stuff and come back to the city. We make no progress.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of tension between the rest of humanity and the Guardians. And Ikora Rey sees this, the widget, and thinks, oh no, we can be defeated now.
Mm-hmm.
We are now more vulnerable than what we were prior to. So it's little lines like that that are just like, ooh, if you caught it, there's a lot going on there for a single line will hold so much weight.
Yeah. Yeah, Bungie, they're really, really good at doing that. They excel at I mean, even with Destiny 1, yeah, the presentation was terrible in terms of the lore was very removed from the average player.
Oh, it was brutal. Oh,
Yeah.
it was so brutal.
Yeah. But yeah, they are. I mean, what often happens is somebody will go back and they'll reference something. They'll look at, like you said, like a weapon like that or something, and they'll realize that that's, yeah, like you said, that throwaway line, that story that didn't seem to be relevant at all. And you know, sometimes Bungie has it planned out. They totally mean to do exactly that. Other times they look back at what they have done and go, we can use that. A good example was before one of the major expansions. I can't remember what item it was, but an exotic item lore tab had like a little poem/riddle on it, and it was like 2 of these things are true and 1 of them's a lie. And it turns out that was major spoilers for the following expansion that came out. Because once you realized who the poetry was referring to, you went, oh, that's exactly what happened.
Right. Oh, that was one of That was one of the Osiris weapons.
Oh, that's right. One of the prophecy
That
weapons.
was
Yeah,
one of these. Yeah, so it was like you will soon. Oh, something about a hidden blade. Something about um, the sleeping dreamer,
Mm-hmm.
and something else that I believe referred to Aldrin, or at least that's what we thought it was going to refer to.
Yeah, it was something like the brother, the lost brother, like like the brother will lose his way, and the one that I always remember is something like the light will go out, uh, in the prison or something like that. Like
Oh yeah.
it was
But yeah,
very.
all of Osiris's prophecies were
Yeah.
like, I can't give you everything, but I
Mm,
can give you just enough.
yeah. So yeah, you're right. The storytelling there is wonderful, and I think I've been advocating for the in-game story to get better, and we're getting to the point where that does happen, where the story is told so clearly on a like day to day, week to week, that content creators like us, we have to change how we do things a little. Because in the past, I was thinking about this earlier today. I was working on a video. In the past,
Mhm.
making a video that basically said, "Hey, this is what happened," that would be a completely valuable and needed video because people missed it. Because it's like, well, on screen it was just some action, but in the lore you got conversations, you got information and development that you didn't get in the game. But now we're getting to a point where those details are becoming more clear to the average player. So you have, which is great for the lore people, because it means that you have more room to offer your own perspective or to analyze. You don't have to catch players
Mhm.
up on the story. You can kind of recap the story and then go, okay, but this is why it's interesting, or this is what we should look out for, that sort of thing.
Right. And it's so you've got a pretty successful Discord going. Also, you've got a great community with it. Glad to be a part of it, by the way. Do you find with some newer players, uh, is it overwhelming? Do they get
Oh yeah,
lost too quickly? I mean, it's definitely overwhelming. It's got to be overwhelming. We've
it's
got
yeah,
7 years, 8 years
yeah.
of content to catch up on.
It definitely is. Because even though the game is improving on those aspects I mentioned, it would have to be, even if it was improving, it, like you said, 7 years of content, uh, and on top of that, 7 years of content plus a game that really excels at deep universe building, right? I
Mm,
mean, there are literally books that have been sold about the lore, about stories that occur technically thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, millions of years before the main character exists. And
yeah.
you may think, well, okay, who cares about that? But it actually provides motivation toward one of our greatest enemies, which can allow us to, not only appreciate them, but to predict them, to try and figure out what's their
Mm,
motivation, right? So for a new player coming in, it's gotten better. The game has a better kind of tutorial experience, and it sets the tone fairly well, but it still doesn't exactly tell you anything about the context. It's more like, here's the universe you live in. Here are the major people to consider, and then you might have a question of, well, why are they here? What are they doing? What happened
mhm.
here? Where I heard this was here. Where did that go? And that is not very well done so far in the game.
Yeah, in game, and that's I feel is a double-edged sword
Mm-hmm.
for Destiny and its community, where you have a massive lore and storytelling community, and the way that the lore is deciphered and assembled and compiled and distilled is through the community, the lore community, which makes it a lot of fun. It makes it a lot of fun to be able to work with other people, bounce ideas off each other, see what conclusions other people brought to you, bring your own style or your own interpretation to everything. It's a lot of fun. But at the same time, This is actually why I started with some older lore, and I want to get back into it as soon as I'm able to, breathe again. I started with the Books of Sorrow for my lore content on my channel because that came out towards the end, the second half of Destiny 1, and it outlines everything, the origin of the Hive and the origin of the Taken. And it is I would say it contains the oldest stories in the Destiny universe. No, it doesn't. It's the one that, is it Constellations? Which one describes the Gardener and the Winnower?
Oh, you're right. You're right. The Book of Unveiling.
Unveiling, there it
the
is.
beginning of the
Right.
universe, apparently.
Yeah, literally. Yeah, you can't get back anymore. You can't go farther back in time than the time when time didn't exist. Wow, I got that out in one shot. Okay. So it's a lot of fun being able to piece everything together, but it's also the double-edged sword of it, where if you're new to it, where do you start?
Yeah.
Like, do you have any suggestions? If
Oh, yeah.
people come to you, like, what are your suggestions for, like, all right, this world is massive. I understand. You're overwhelmed. That's normal. Here's
Yeah.
where you can start.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, little self plug here, but I made a couple of videos in response to that. I felt for the new player community who just wasn't able to understand where things were coming from and everything. So I made a Destiny in 1 minute video, and I made a Destiny in 6 minute video.
Did you record the audio and then speed it up? Because that's a lot to get through in 1 minute.
So what I did was I wrote it a couple of times, and writing it a couple of times helped me learn how to kind of cut down on certain things and kind of use language that allowed me to say two things at once without being too confusing. And my thinking was, if they want, they can go back, they can rewatch it. But those videos helped. There's some other resources in the community that are very good. There is a previously on Destiny website that recaps what has happened every season, every expansion, with relative links and stuff like that. Fantastic piece of work done by somebody in the community.
Nice.
The main places to check into are Destinypedia or the Ishtar Collective. Destinypedia has a lot of, like Wikipedia, it has a lot of write-up about different elements in the game, and you can literally just go to their page about story and kind of just follow along. But like Wikipedia, you also have to kind of check the source material on your own because things change and etc. Ishtar Collective has a page called Timeline where they present the lore and a write-up about the lore in kind of in-game, in chronological order. But
I have seen that. It's impressive.
Yeah,
there's a lot in there.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with the lore with Destiny is that there's so much of it. And in a way, I mean, even if you think about all the amazing content creators out there and all the amazing content that they've made, it's so overwhelming, right? The lore community is both big and small, and it's kind of weird to think about that way, because if you compare it with the other metrics, like, I don't know, it's a looter shooter. So if you compare it with people who make videos on weapons and, all this kind of stuff, the community who watches those are probably, the largest portion in the game. The community that watches lore content is generally much smaller. But at the same time, if you want to try and catch up on all the content that they're making, you will become overwhelmed. So what I always tell people is I always give them a basics, like just a basic who we are, what we're doing, a little bit of background on the different enemy types, and a short background on where we are in the story right now. And thankfully, Destiny is doing that latter part every season. Every time you log back on, first time you log back on within a new season, it goes, hey, this is the story. This is the conflict right now. It doesn't tell you previously on Destiny, which is why that website was developed, but it does tell you where we are now. So I usually, those three elements, basics, kind of the basics of enemy types in the world, where we are now. And then if people want to get into more, I see the lore content community as more like librarians than some people get a little defensive. They think that lore content people are trying to gatekeep or say we're experts or lore masters or whatever. I see it's more as librarians, where you can the story of Destiny, it's printed in books, literally and figuratively, and those books and those pages are shuffled, rearranged, written in different perspectives, and it can be very confusing but very fun to kind of go down the go down the rabbit hole of conspiracy and lore and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But the librarians, the lore community who's interested in following this, okay, we may know a little bit because we have been following it, but our biggest resource is to be able to share it and say, oh, you want to know more about this enemy type? Here, check this out. Check this out.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you missed that content? No problem. Here you go. And that's really where I think a lot of us come from. We provide analysis, we provide directions. Sure, for anybody who's never going to read the lore, and who there are people who literally are interested in the story, but even when they play the game, they fast forward through it, they skip cutscenes because they enjoy the game and they want to play it, and that's
Mm-hmm.
fine. But they're still interested in the lore. They'll come to lore videos and check them out. And I think for them, yeah, the biggest asset that we provide is kind of another resource that they can use to find their way.
Yeah. So I'm going to move away from Destiny for just a little bit.
Oh yeah,
And I
go
sent
for
you
it.
an article a little while ago before the show,
Mhm.
and I'd love to chat about that a little bit. And this is gaming in the news, and the Tribeca Film Festival has been known to put the spotlight on games every once in a while. Gaming has been a part of their festival for a few years now, but this year is the inaugural year that they're actually going to formally recognize a list of 8 different video games. And this is something that I've been trying to push to whoever will listen to me. And usually it's kind of like the whole preaching to the choir type of situation, but I've been able to earn a few converts every once in a while if I am able to get deep enough into a discussion of story and what it takes to actually produce a game. And as I said, I'm going to assume that you agree that games are art. They are their own art form.
Definitely.
What do you say to that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, even if you try to take what you might think is the least artistic form of game, there is an art behind it. There is
Mm-hmm.
there are. I mean, you're getting into questions of what is art, but there's so much design elements. There's so many. There's design. There's interaction with the community. There is the voice of the author, right? What exactly you're trying to convey or get across. It's one of those things where people don't recognize it as art either because of a lack of experience or because it is new, right? I mean, there was a time where animation was not considered eligible for Academy Awards.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was because people recognized the hard work and the artistry behind it, right? But I think video games are the same, and it's very difficult to hold on to that argument when you see how far into even traditional art forms video games go. I mean, if you're sitting here trying to say that video games are not art, and then you look at the concept art, you look at the environmental art, you listen to the music,
Beautiful.
you look at this. I mean, look at games like The Last of Us and storytelling like that. There are people. Was it PlayStation was advertising when The Last of Us came out? One of their ads was like a couple sitting down to movie night, and one of the partners was like, "Oh, I love this, like the story is so gripping, and I got the popcorn."
Mhm.
And the other person was like, "They don't know it's a video game," and he's got his like hands under the table,
No,
like,
it was it one of the Uncharted?
"Oh, might be
It might have
Uncharted."
been one of the Uncharted. I remember that video. It's hysterical.
Yeah.
Um,
So I
Yeah.
mean, like it's very hard to hold on to that argument. I think that they're not
Mhm.
art at this point.
So I was the one time I was able to give a panel talk at a local convention. I did how gaming and geek culture is inspiring a new generation of artists, and one of the things that I brought up was at another uh, tournament that I was. Um, so for the podcast, I get involved in the local scene, and I'm able to get like press pass and media passes to some events, and I get to interview vendors and media guests, stuff like that. So at one of these esports tournaments, I was able to attend a panel talk of development of uh, the games industry in the local area, and I was able to ask the question. Huge lead up for this one question, right? Sorry about that. Uh, how do they see games as a driving force for the arts? And one of the guys on the panel just kind of like perked up and said, "Oh, was not expecting that." Because apparently he's got a fine arts background and he's now like one of the lead managers at one of our local studios. And everyone kind of got excited and this weird grin on their face. It's like, um, this is an interesting question. Let's talk about that a little bit. And another one of the studio heads openly said, "Here's something you need to people need to understand. I employ more artists than developers. I I employ more artists than engineers and people who code." And I'm like, yeah, it's because if you think about it just a little bit, you've got character design, weapon design, environment design, level design, all of these things need to have different aesthetics. I was able to, at a Star Trek convention, which I never thought I'd ever say that sentence, but I was able to talk to one of the lead illustrators and designers about the um, how you come up with a different aesthetic for the different races within the Star Trek universe. And everyone's got their own version of the phaser. Everyone's got their own version of the communicator. Everyone's got their own version of their colonial transport or little fighter ships. And um it's all art. And it was really it was surprising to me. I was not expecting for them to hire more artists than engineers, but there it is, like right from a studio head's mouth.
Yeah.
So, what game would you say like really has impressed you recently, as far as its art direction, besides Destiny?
That's a good question. I mean, let me think. I'm a little isolated a little bit from lots of other games. I
Oh
play
no!
No, it's okay. I play a lot of Destiny. I always come back to it. I dive right in.
Hmm.
Um, Games I've played recently. So the two games I've played most recently, other than Destiny, were Outriders and Control. Very different types of
Okay.
games,
Yeah,
and
those are very different. Hmm.
yeah, and both did a really good job, I think, with setting the tone of their universe through the art design. So
Hmm.
in Outriders, I mean, the world
It's
is very
brutal.
alien. Yeah, it's
Hmm.
brutal. Everything, you know. For example, Destiny's art design most of the time, everything looks barren. Everything looks empty because it's a post-apocalyptic kind of world, but it's
Hmm.
long after that. Outriders, everything is currently dangerous. Everything is,
Hmm. Okay.
right. And then in Control is a kind of I always forget the acronym, but it's think of it like an extension of the X Files. It's seeking out. It's a agency that seeks out paranormal activity and items and creepy things like this. And what they've done is they take a normal kind of office environment and sometimes they literally turn it upside down. They've yeah they add they add elements that are just a little bit jarring or just a little bit subtle, but
Hmm.
you still catch it, or it's dramatically different. You go into what you think is a normal office and it's now this grotesque sort of paranormal world.
Nice.
Yeah, it's called SCP is kind of the acronym. If outside of gaming, there's actually a website where people contribute. It's kind of like a Wikipedia of paranormal objects, but people kind of add to it, and they add mystery and intrigue. And in the game Control, every moment makes it very clear that you are in kind of an alternate reality. You are in a reality that can be affected by this paranormal. So those two games were really well done, because even without listening to the story or reading the lore, or even engaging with the actual gameplay, you got the idea right away what kind of world you were living in, and the quality of it was top notch.
Nice. All right, so we're going to move into the final uh, segment. There's the word I'm looking for. Final segment of this show. And we're going to get to questions. And I'm following along in chat, and I see that there have been a few questions added. Are you able to access these questions?
Yeah, actually, we both are, but I'll
Oh,
let's see here. I'll put
oops.
no. I if you check that link right there, I'll put it up.
Okay.
I can open up as well. Some of them haven't. Yeah, okay, we're good. So
Okay, so I'm looking at them.
a few of them.
All right.
The first one's an older question. It's actually, I can delete that. Some of them
Okay.
are Destiny focused, so it's up to you if we want to focus on them. I think the third one is pretty.
You know,
interesting.
I'm essentially working with a Destiny streamer, content creator right now, so we'll go through it. All
Yeah.
right. So you said the first one we can pretty much skip. So the second one is: do you think Misrax and his Fallen actually pose a threat to us, or is Lakshmi 2 jumping the gun a bit?
Yeah, so for
So I've
context,
got
anybody who's out there, then that's the premise of the new season. The new season is an alien race that's typically our enemy. We actually have invited a few of them under our protection in exchange for them to help us deal with the new threat, enemy of my enemy sort of deal. And the question is, can we really trust them, or are we right to be anxious about them? Because that seems to be the direction that this season is taking us.
So my thought: yes, we can trust Misrax.
Mm-hmm.
He's already proven himself. We've helped him on the 0-hour mission. He's worked with Guardians before. He's trying to bring the Elixni, not to sound like a missionary, he's bringing the Elixni to the light, but within the Destiny universe. He's the Kel of the House of Light, and he's helping. I mean, that was a whole part, big part of what's going on Europa right now, with evacuating the remaining Elixni, or the Fallen, off of the planet and bring them to Earth. Bring them to that little section of the Lost City, or excuse me, of the Last City.
Yeah, it's so something that because the gap between story and lore in Destiny is generally wide, you have this problem within the community sometimes where the people who've been reading the lore are anticipating some of these developments, but the people who don't read the lore, it seems to come out of nowhere. And I think, especially
Fair
if they're
statement.
yeah, if they're new players, or if they're not really so much into the lore, then this has happened. And now it's the first time that we're seeing this alien race presented to us in any way other than being a warrior or a monster or something. Every time we see them otherwise, except for three examples in the game, every other time they're attacking us. So it is new. I agree with you. I like the way this season is being set up. It's always interesting when a conflict is both internal and external. You worry about the alien invasion, but you also worry about civil war, or at least feelings that could lead to something like that. Those kinds of struggles. So my short answer is I do think that we can trust them. The one character, Misrax, we've worked with him before, and he's shown that he thinks a lot differently than the typical alien races that we have.
Yes.
And I think, with all the threats that we know or that we presume are coming, we can use all the help we can get.
Yeah. And the second half of this is Lakshmi 2. Is Lakshmi 2 jumping the gun a bit? I almost see this when I saw her appear on screen during the cinematic. I was like, oh, we're finally going to hear from Lakshmi again. So I think she's just kind of being cautious. and it's an excuse to bring another member of the Vanguard, uh,
Yeah.
bring them into the story as well. We haven't heard from any of the heads of the factions in a
No.
long time, so
Yeah, and it makes
sure,
me
bring Lakshmi back.
yeah, it makes me happy because that was one of the things I was worried about when the season was about to start. We got the premise of it from the trailer, and I said, "Look, you want us to protect the city, and you want us to be worried about the opinions of the people in the city who may be afraid of these new allies.
All right.
You have to connect us to those connect us to the people of the city." And that's a problem with a game like Destiny is it sets itself up as an MMORPG, but rather than the typical MMORPG where you live in the village, you can interact with the people, you can see the people you're trying to save, the city is always far away. It's literally in the skybox. So
Okay.
I'm really glad to see that they are kind of bringing that front and center. And I agree, it's good to hear the character come back, and I hope that they use that opportunity to again draw us into the story more.
Mm. All right. So,
One of the other
go ahead.
I was gonna say, if you have time for more questions, one of them didn't jump in there, but I'll recite it for you.
Okay.
The question was it was about ghosts in Destiny and about the
Oh,
Fallen. Where was it? It was how did the Fallen have the light without ghosts? Did they have any of the same powers? So I don't know if you've heard about any of this. This
I
kind of
have not.
so
We know that they had their own golden age, and what they experienced was the whirlwind, and they've been chasing the machine god, the traveler, ever since.
right,
So,
yeah. So the Traveler, the Machine God, was over their head, and um, yeah, it was over.
actually, okay,
Oh.
go ahead. I just had a thought. Go ahead.
Yeah, the Traveler, which gave us power, was over their civilization for a while, and seemingly didn't give them any. It did not seem to give them any abilities. But something we're kind of learning this season is that maybe they did have some. They did seem to have some kind of ability, some kind of power. But
Well, I'm wondering. Sorry to cut you off.
yeah, yeah.
I'm wondering if they just had a golden age, but they didn't have like guardians of light. Much like humanity had our golden age, but we didn't have guardians until the darkness arrived. And in quote, the traveler's last breath, it created the ghosts.
Mm-hmm.
So we had a golden age, just like the Elixni did, but the guardians, the warriors that we play as, they were not created until the traveler did its last ditch effort.
Yeah, as far as we know, any amount of power that they did receive was it was not significantly enough or concentrated enough in an individual, seemingly, to say that they had like warriors of the light or anything like that. It's always been suggested that they learned some kind of wisdom, they gained some kind of ability. Their race has always been very technologically strong, and everyone assumed that was why. Currently, the Splicer Gauntlet, the seasonal item, kind of so to speak, it has some lore that suggests that these Elixni, these characters, they can't quite use the light like we can. They can't manifest terrible forces and defensive shielding and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But what they can do is they can kind of bend the light. They can kind of shift reality in a little way or shift the
Okay.
energies. So that's still new and ongoing. But I
I
think
need to read that. I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but definitely gotta.
it's
Okay.
very new, and it's only one entry, so it doesn't have as much depth as it could. But yeah, it's an
Okay.
interesting thing, and even if they didn't, the question always comes up: why did they not have it, and why do we? And the answer is we don't know. That's part of the mystery
Right.
of the game, right? Yeah.
And we'll run through this one real quick. Well, we are always hearing about a new game that will be the game killer. Outrider is supposed to be the Destiny killer. Do you think there will ever be a game killer? And at the risk of going on way too long on this question, I mean, it's a fair question. It's a great question. It really is. to pull people away from Destiny, it has to be better than Destiny. Not just better, but better enough to pull people away from the communities and friendships and investment that they've already put into the game. And that's a huge hurdle
Yeah.
to clear.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
It needs to be. Go ahead.
No, I don't mean to interrupt you. I completely agree. I mean, there's I guess you could say there are three elements at play. Is the fact that Destiny has PvP and PvE, the fact that it has an amazing story and lore, and the third related to it is what you're saying, the community itself. The the game and the franchise is built around the idea of creating a universe where communities can form, right? Where people can they can make friends and they can live in the game and they can be involved with the game, and that creates. I mean, that creates not just loyalty. That sounds bad, but it creates an immersion and a collaborative feeling with the game and the universe, so that even when it's going through the toughest times, the people in the game feel a lot more connected than I think they do with other games, other genres. It's just and then there's the other points that you said, like trying to make a game that's even better. I mean, there are issues with the game for sure, and some of them
Sure.
can be very large, but because the game does so much, it's very hard to compete with it.
Okay. All right, so we are going to move on to. Oh, I don't know if I mentioned this to you. I used to have such a system set up.
It's okay.
Anyway, this is the final 5 questions of the show to wrap this up. The final 5 questions are a series of 5 questions that range from irrelevant to irreverent. The first 2 are always the same. The last 3 have a theme to them. Here we go. So
he's not
question
told me
number
these
1.
questions, chat. So everybody listening in the podcast, we'll see how this goes. If I pass the test.
Evil laugh. So first question: coffee or tea?
Ooh, neither.
What?
I don't drink either. I'm very strange. I'm very hard to satisfy beverage wise. I don't drink coffee. I don't drink tea, and I don't drink alcohol. So honestly, if you're gonna offer me something, juice or cold water, because apparently
Okay,
I'm
so we're
bored.
no longer friends,
Yeah.
but we can continue this podcast.
It's more for you, right? Somebody offers me like, any of those 3 and then you can have it. But if I had to choose, I would choose tea, because at least there are like fruity types of tea, there are like,
Okay.
green teas, lots of stuff.
All right, freak.
Off to a
Moving
good
on.
start. Yeah.
Question 2. We know you play video games. Do you play any tabletop games?
I do. Well, okay. Does tabletop role-playing game count?
Absolutely.
Then yes, I do. I've been playing Dungeons and Dragons for, wow. I wish I
Are we
could
getting into decades?
Yeah, about 15 years, I guess. Not as much
Okay.
as I would like in those 15 years, but off and on for about that long. Yeah.
And I always mention this to people. The last time I played Dungeons and Dragons was 2nd edition, when it was advanced Dungeons and Dragons back in the
Nice.
late 90s.
Yeah.
So, and it's fun to talk to some people about the differences, because you explain some of the mechanics and they just look at you and like, why would you make it so complicated?
Yeah, depending on the edition you're in, they each kind of have their own approach to it, right? So some things have been kind of codified and gotten a bit better. You could argue that some of the new systems are easier to understand, but they're maybe a bit more limiting. But yeah, it's always fun to listen to that. Like, what is acceptable in a different edition? When either when it was just starting out, or when it just had a system that completely is upside down to the philosophy of a newer edition.
What is THACO, and why is it good that my armor class is a -4?
Yeah, why can a wizard be killed by a house cat? Stuff like this.
All right. So on to the themed questions. Since you are a space engineer, these will all be within the realm of space. Don't worry, there are no wrong answers unless I arbitrarily decide so. So, first question, which ship in Destiny has the worst design for space travel?
Oh man, yeah, let me think.
Are there too many to choose from?
I'm trying to think of. So you have it. Yeah, sorry, it's one of those things where the more you know, the slower your answer because there's like a lot of variables. I'm just gonna go out with my gut. I'm gonna go with my gut answer, which is the scrap. What is it? Drifter ship.
Oh, okay.
Where is it?
Oh, the derelict. That thing.
The scrap CF71791.
Oh, okay.
Literally called a refurbished ship. It's like 4 different ships smashed together.
And there it is. I see it on stream right now. That's fantastic.
It's yeah. I mean, when you were asking your question, I was like, well, if you have an aerodynamic ship, that's good for landing, but you don't need an aerodynamic ship to fly in space. You can fly a giant brick. That's fine.
There's no air resistance if there's no air.
Yeah, exactly. But the problem with Drifter's ship is it doesn't know what it wants to do. It's a chimera. It's the platypus of spaceships. So it's got too many features, and none of them are the right features. So yeah, I would go with that.
Okay. Question number 4. What is an experiment that you would love to do in zero gravity?
Ooh, good question. Experiment I would love to do in zero gravity. Oh. It's been a while since I thought about that. Okay, so this is going to be a weird one. Probably
Excellent.
And it's not even that hard to set up, and it's kind of related to gaming. I think it'd be interesting to test perception and reflexes both in zero gravity and when one of the participants is upside down. And I'll explain what I mean. We have found out that astronauts had an issue when dealing with their I was going to say coworkers, with their fellow astronauts in space. One of the reasons is because the human brain, you can read faces, right? Some people are really good at this and some people are really bad at this, but generally if you look at someone and they frown, you understand that they're upset. If they kind of squint or they make a face, you can kind of read what that means, and you can anticipate their mood and what they may need, etc. The mind doesn't know how to do that as well if you're upside down. So what's happening is on the space station, they're all living, they're all working, and an astronaut floats by upside down, and they're like, hey, can you, hand me that wrench or hand me that thing? And you don't perceive the face as well. And so you are not able to really anticipate. So what will happen is one of your fellow astronauts may be upset. Maybe you ate the last of the space cheese or something. It sounds horrible, but maybe you ate the last of something, and they would make a face. You would ask them what's wrong. They would tell you. You'd resolve the problem, but you don't notice that, so you don't ask that, and you don't solve it. So probably some kind of weird experiment with playing video games upside down, or doing some kind of sports or something, which is maybe doesn't sound that exciting when, I don't know, doing some kind of high tech whatever. But I think it's always fascinating to me just how similar but different zero gravity can be.
Well, that actually, I'm thinking back to the beginning of this show, where if we're going to be having more and more people go up, this is something to consider.
Mm-hmm.
If we're going to send more and more people up, there's going to be a social aspect to it all.
Yeah.
Huh.
It's
That's
something
fascinating.
Now that people are starting, government agencies are starting to consider to send people back to the moon or to Mars eventually. They are starting to think about the long-term effects, because right now everybody who goes into space, almost 99.9% of people who've been to space they have been professional astronauts. And when you are a professional astronaut, not only do you know everything about, the physics and the math and the engineering, but you are a professional. You act very professionally. You are trained. You have these instincts that are developed over a long time of training, and that's not going to be the same if you go up as a tourist, or if you go up as a scientist, treating it like a kind of a remote working environment. So people who are looking at developing these kinds of missions are looking at the psychological impact more and more. You sometimes hear news stories about like NASA is considering like an all-woman crew to Mars, because there are benefits of having like when they do tests, sometimes they might show that, oh, in this group, the group that was all women were, I don't know, 34% more efficient, and reported they were more happy than this other group that was mixed, or this other group that was all male. Right? The research is still in development, but it's an uncharted territory of the human effects of space travel.
Awesome. Wow, that's fascinating. Thank you for that. And the final question. Where do you keep your shrine to Neil deGrasse Tyson?
Well, just like the coffee and tea answer, I'm gonna have to be a little bit contrarian to you. So I have a little bit of a rant, and Neil, if you're listening, I hope that you'll understand. Neil deGrasse Tyson is an excellent symbol and a decent spokesperson for the space community, but I think what has happened with poor Neil in the last decade, I think he is, a little bit of background context, Chad, if you're not aware. Carl Sagan was an American scientist and spokesperson for science, and he became he's very popular. He's almost like Stan Lee for Marvel Comics, right? He's kind of the Stan Lee of space and of science. And Neil deGrasse Tyson kind of has tried to follow in his footsteps. And I think what has happened is, in light of internet culture, and maybe he's kind of gotten frustrated with his own main priority. His own priority is explaining science to people who don't know about it, or maybe haven't cared about it as much. And I don't know about you, but in the last decade, I've seen a growing negativity, maybe sometimes condescension coming from Neil. And I'm sure that's what it is. I'm sure it's just fatigue. I mean, if you deal with trolls all the time, and there's a lot of science deniers these days. So I've had a hard time with him. Not that I actually ever deal with him personally, but from what I've seen him post and his being active, I think he sometimes just runs out of patience, and then that patience manifests publicly. But yeah.
To piggyback off that, my wife and I, a couple of years back, tried to watch the reboot of Bill Nye. So it's like Bill Nye Saves the World or something like that. And we watched like the first couple of episodes, and we're just thinking, Bill's angry. Like he is not a pleasant man right now.
Yeah.
But we kind of theorized right along what you're talking about. Both of these guys have had to deal with internet trolls and science denial for so long. Just like, for the love of anything that is, yes, masks work.
Yeah. And it's,
for the last time.
even if even if everything was going great, just having to repeat yourself over and over gets frustrating.
Yeah.
And that's not even adding in people not believing them and current political climate. So no, I don't have a shrine to Neil deGrasse Tyson, but in my living room I do have a shrine to a lot of science fiction, Star Wars, Star Trek, all that kind of stuff. And to relate it back to what you're saying, it's a combination of story and technology. What could be possible based on what we imagine and what we work to make real. And I know that sounds a little like, Oh, Kaz, there. Yeah, did you
Get a little whimsical.
Yeah, did you rehearse that? But no, I mean that's why I'm into it. It's
Mhm.
really cool to see what is possible out there.
All right. So we are going to wrap this bad boy up. Time for end of show plugs. So once again, I am Anthony. Find me pretty much everywhere at Hypersyntax, which is HYP3RSINT4X. I am on Twitter, Instagram, PlayStation is where I'm doing most of my gaming right now. My YouTube channel is growing, and that is youtube.com/c/video game crosstalk. And I've also been doing some additional work with the Destiny Lore audiophile podcast, which is Destiny Lore set to, well, it was audiobook format. Now it's becoming more of an audio drama. And also been working with the crew over at Game Insider Magazine. I've been narrating some video game preview and review videos for them. So go check that out as well. And Kaz, where can our lovely listeners follow you around?
Yeah, so on Twitch and Twitter, it's Kaz_PhD, Kaz or Z _PhD. YouTube is Embrace Destiny. So, youtube.com/c/embrace Destiny, 2 words. And yeah, I'm mostly on YouTube. I focus on lore and exploring this story, mostly of Destiny. And in the other places, I'm sometimes lore, sometimes what's real, sometimes science, sometimes just hanging out. So, yeah, if you want to come and find me, if you have any questions, I always work to try and make myself and my community as open as possible to new ideas, new questions, people who are lost, who need help, or people who have differing opinions. It's always good to chat with them and try to come up with something new.
All right. And as soon as crossplay officially becomes available, I'm definitely hunting you down so I can finish off my Wish Ender Bow mission.
I'll
Need
be
to
here.
get that done.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Please, if you are new to the show, and I see a few people in chat, hey, chat, what's going on? Please give me a follow. I'm on Podbean, but can be followed on every podcatcher that you use. Leave a review on iTunes. That helps me out oh so much. And share this podcast amongst all your friends. And in closing, oh, darn it, I left my inspirational quote of the day in the other office. Dang gummit. Until next time, I'll see you in the tower. And that is the end of the show.
Nice. Let's stop recording there. And stop recording.